Welcome, everybody, to the Denver Post debate for the mayoral runoff to decide who will be the next mayor of Denver. We are here at the historic Denver Press Club, which is co-hosting this event with us, and we're excited to have everybody here. With us, we have Mayor Michael Hancock, who is seeking re-election for a third term, and Jamie Gillis, who beat out two other challengers besides you, of course, to join Mayor Hancock in this runoff. It's been a great couple weeks of watching these two people, and we are excited to hear what they have to say. So I would now like to introduce our moderator, Andy Kinney, who covers city politics for the Denver Post. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you. And thanks to all of you for being here and to the candidates as well. There are fewer of you than last time that we did this. I thought to myself when we hit the runoff that this would just be way simpler and easier because there's fewer candidates, and that did not turn out to be true. The format of the debate will be I pose a question to one candidate or the other. They have 90 seconds to respond. The second candidate then has 90 seconds for their own response, and the original candidate will then have 30 seconds to rebut. And the idea of that, we're going to alternate who the first candidate is. The idea is that each candidate will have questions somewhat tailored to them. Both candidates will be able to have their say, and they'll have each their own turn to get the final word. And I do believe this might be one of the final words in the runoff campaign. I don't think that we have further debates scheduled, so I'm going to do my best. Don't blame me. So let's begin. We're going to start with a few topical questions, and Mayor Michael Hancock drew number one, correct? Yes. So we're going to start with you. The first one is on criminal justice. In 2018, Denver saw 67 homicides. That was the highest number since 2004, and it was the fourth straight year of increases, although it remained well below the levels of the 1990s. What do you see as the causes of that increase in violent crime, and how are you responding?
Thank you, Andy. You know what? We have seen across this country an increase in violent crime, unfortunately. And I can tell you that the mayors and police chiefs and communities are working hard to try to figure this out. One of the things that we've noticed in Denver is a spike in domestic violence that is leading to ultimately fatalities in our communities. And so I work very closely with Police Chief Payson. He has made domestic violence, are pushing back on issues and helping us to prevent domestic violence, one of the top issues in the police department. We just announced a new unit in the Denver Police Department to focus just on domestic violence, as it has driven a lot of our challenges with regards to homicides in Denver. And so we are focused and like laser focused on the issue of I keep saying murders in Denver, as well as recognizing what are the root causes. And when we look at the challenges, domestic violence has been one of those causes. Of course, we continue to look at some of the socioeconomic challenges of lower income communities that always is an example or a really indicator of these type of violent crimes occurring. But I also want to acknowledge the fact that our Director of Safety, Troy Riggs, has rolled out the Opportunity Index, and the goal is to prevent these type of crimes before they happen. And you do that by taking a comprehensive look at neighborhoods that have had the highest incidence of indicators to tell us where poverty exists and other indicators that might lead to violence and crime.
Thank you, Mayor Hancock. We're going to reframe the same question, largely the same question for Ms. Gillis. I'm also interested to hear in your response and in Mayor Hancock's final 30 seconds about whether you see any potential for surveillance technology such as facial recognition, license plate readers to help combat this. But please take the question as you will.
Yeah, I want to answer the question also by talking about the importance of working within the community. I was in Montbello earlier this afternoon, and we had a community conversation, and one of the things that repeatedly came up is about how there are community members, neighbors, community organizations working on issues of violence with kids, or working on gang violence. And the conversation they had with me was that They feel like the community is taking on the work and the costs out of their own pocket and the responsibility, in many ways, of addressing specific community issues. And while they've tried to work with the city, while they've tried to push and ask for support and help in these grassroots approaches to community issues, they've struggled. They have struggled to get an answer or a response or any level of support from the mayor's office. I think that's a huge opportunity. We definitely need to look at our policing. And under Chief Payson switching to the community policing model, I give kudos to that, the way we look neighborhood by neighborhood at addressing specific issues. But the way we also succeed is by partnering, and that's how you get to the prevention side. How are you dealing with our youth and engaging them after school? How are you addressing the root cause of stress in a family, which is cost of living, which is the fact that parents have to work multiple jobs, and so kids are often left to their own devices. Those are opportunities we have working with these great community organizations to tackle this in partnership with the community.
Thank you, Ms. Gillis. Mr. Hancock, your rebuttal, and you don't need to address the surveillance technology question since Ms. Gillis didn't get to it.
You know, the reality is that it is a comprehensive approach. The Opportunity Index provides us the opportunity to talk about the things and go into communities and address the same issues that Jamie just talked about. So we have already deployed that under Troy Riggs' leadership and the Opportunity Index. But let me also tell you, crime in Denver is down across the entire sheet of indicators except for violent aggravated assault. And this is an issue that tells us that there are some things that we can do to zero in on it. We have more arrests on violent crime today than we do on the personal property crimes that occur, and that's due to the police department's work.
The second question begins with Ms. Gillis. In our first Denver Post debate, we heard from quite a number of attendees that climate change was one of their top concerns. What I would like to hear from you is about how specifically the effects of climate change will play out in Denver, and secondarily, how you'll respond to that.
Thank you. Well, this is clearly a significant issue since we're seeing significant air quality issues in particular related to congestion, related to growth, related to emissions, levels that in some cases we've never seen related to ozone, but also haven't seen since the 80s when Federico Pena took office and faced much the same challenge. This is a complex issue. We get that, but part of it is focusing on our green space, our environmental goals, which we, in the last year, have just kicked back another 10 years. So I want to talk about some specifics. First of all, we know we have to address transportation. Transportation and congestion leads to some significant problems, and the congestion is out of control. We know we can also address the built environment, how we build buildings sustainably, how the city leads on that front, how we require more of the development community. And we do also have a responsibility to work on emissions. Suncor was in the news this week, and I had asked the mayor at a previous debate, what about Suncor? Where's the city's leadership on Suncor? And the mayor replied, Suncor is not in Denver. That's fine, but we need to have a regional approach to our sustainability issues. It is going to take a partnership with the metro region and our partners around us. And also, adding to our park space, we've just slipped to 29th, adding to our tree canopy and focusing on air quality and water quality at the same time are all critically important.
Mayor Hancock, let's return to the center of that question. How do you see climate change specifically playing out in Denver before you respond to Jamie's general comments, to Ms. Gillis's general comments, especially about Suncor and the regional approach?
Our sustainability action plan really is one of the more progressive, ambitious plans in the country today. Reducing carbon emissions 80% by 2050. Making sure that we're benchmarking our city buildings, our buildings throughout the city, and as they're being designed, as they're being built, and helping to benchmark those that exist today to reduce their energy. We know that with a city growing as fast as Denver, we have to be dogged about reducing our single occupant vehicles from 73% to 50% by 2030. We have a sustainability action plan that is already rolled out. So here's what we're doing in the next term. We're going to double down on those efforts to make sure that we are driving policy that reduces CO2 emissions for new buildings being built. Continue to benchmark those that have not been benchmarked in the city of Denver, which, by the way, had a 90% volunteer opt-in rate recently in the first year and saw a 14% decrease in energy use, which is a phenomenal statistic.
Mayor Hancock,
yes.
part of the question,
Yeah.
the specific effects of climate change in Denver.
Yeah, I'm getting to it. Because one of the things we recognize is that we have, with climate change, the need to make sure we move rapidly. And that's why we need to expedite this over the next term. This is a health issue for all of us. And if we recognize it as not just this, middle class educated response to an issue, this is a health issue, and people who are lower income are most vulnerable to climate change. And that's why we move forward with the strategies that we're pushing as quickly as we can for equity.
Thank you, Mayor.
I would just respond to that by saying if it is an important issue, why we kicked back our goals from 2020 to 2030, why we are in this time of prosperity, why we have not invested in transportation and real solutions to get cars off the street, while we're investing in projects that are going over budget and are being mismanaged that don't directly impact the quality of life of the people here. Why we haven't fought harder for our communities, for our marginalized communities like Globeville, Elyria, and Swansea that have been left behind on this issue.
Mr. Hancock, let me have you touch briefly on one of the specific claims that are 2020 to 2030 in terms of goals.
I don't know what particular goal are you speaking to when you say from 2020 to 2030.
Ms.
What
Gillis?
goal are you speaking to?
Your environmental goals that you recently readdressed the plan that was set for 2020 delivery, and you delivered a new plan for 2030, pushing a lot of those goals back.
Oh, I appreciate that. So you are speaking about our 2020 goals that we laid out 4 or 5 years ago, which we are moving forward with each of those demarcations, as well as have a full city involvement in terms of organizations that are outside the city who are partnering with us. And as we move forward, we all actually learn things that we can take advantage of and we can pursue. And so the reality is, whether we are doing them in 2020, 2030, or 2040, we have goals in the city of Denver. They're very ambitious, they're very aspirational, and the bottom line is that we have one of the most progressive strategies to deal with climate change in the country, and we're doing it right now.
Thank you. The next question is for Mayor Hancock. We've heard a lot over the course of the campaign, various statistics about the ways that Denver has changed from jobs created to the number of international airline flights. But thinking more broadly, give our audience, give our viewers a convincing case for why Denver is a better place to live now versus 2011.
Well, I appreciate that. Let me have you think about something. The people decide, as well as many in the media decide, where the best places to live in America. We said we want to be the best place to live in America. That was an inspirational, ambitious goal for the city of Denver. We are the 7th safest city in the country, even in the midst of an unprecedented growth that no other city in this country has seen. Yes, we've created over 100,000 jobs. We have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country. But let me ask you to think about something. Where was Denver ranked in 2010 and 2011 in terms of best cities to live in America? We weren't. Today, Denver is number 2 in the country behind Austin, and twice during my tenure, we were ranked number 1 in the country. It's because this city has been able to put together the formula of public investment, private activation, and citizen engagement to really address the challenges that had us in the doldrums of the recession, and really not only had us come out of the recession, but thrive out of the recession. And it wasn't an aberration. It's been sustained. And we continue to be the most desirable city in the country for people to want to live and want to stay here, and for investment. And all over the globe, Denver has hit that globe with a brand, with a strategy, and with an appreciation for the global marketplace. And people have appreciated and they've responded to Denver's presence there. So it's not just the mayor saying it, I'm not just cheerleading. These are real metrics that people are looking at that we should be all proud of, because the people of Denver have continuously invested in the city and its infrastructure to make it the city that it is today.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock. Ms. Gillis, conversely, is Denver worse off in 2019 than 2011? Is it better in some way? How has it changed?
Well, the mayor likes to put this on a spectrum of we're a dying city or we're a thriving city. And the truth is there's a lot more nuance to it than that. We all know that we have changed significantly in the last 8 years. But prosperity doesn't always benefit everybody. And when you talk to the people of this city, they aren't feeling that prosperity across the board. What they're feeling is a struggle with the cost of housing, with the rising property tax, with the lack of affordable transportation, with the fact they have to work multiple jobs and don't get to see their kids. They're struggling. There was a recent article about a Baltimore mayor who was ousted from office. And the quote said something to the effect of, she put the value of the brand ahead of the value of the people. And I think that's a critical point to remember. You can have newspaper rankings and magazine articles that talk all day long about the quality of life, but the truth is the people on the ground in this city feel left behind by what has happened. And we, in order to be a high quality of life city, need to take care of it, people. That's why I got in this race, to put people first, to give a voice back to the neighborhoods, to ensure we were investing in the basics that you need to support a growing, thriving city. So I think people would tell you, and they have, that in a lot of ways, they've seen Denver change for the good. There have been opportunities, but that pendulum swung very fast for people, and they feel unprotected at this moment in terms of how they're going to continue to live here with their families.
Mr. Hancock, your rebuttal?
Denver's economic revitalization was driven exactly how the people wanted us to drive it. When I became mayor in 2011, we met with the community. We said, how should we begin our process of changing? Jamie may not recall, but we had a vote in 2012 to de-Bruce this city. And it was the people in rooms just like this who came together and said, Mayor, yes, de-Bruce, invest in our infrastructure, invest in job creation, invest in our small businesses. You probably didn't vote in that election, since you don't vote in Denver but half the time. But the reality is that people of Denver stood up, and the revitalization that we've experienced is due to the people of Denver and the strategies they gave us when we presented them to them.
Well, I've got to let Ms. Gillis respond to that. Did you vote in that election? And
I did vote in that election, and also I just want to mention to the debrucing, you know, that is great. It allowed the city to be able to have in that moment more revenues to be able to address needs. The problem is people are drowning in property taxes right now. Property tax bills just came out before the election, the primary election, and I've talked to a lot of people that saw 20 to 40% increases, some more than that on top of same level of increases 2 years ago. So people are drowning in property taxes, and we do need to look at how we provide them some relief.
I think we need a
35%
rebuttal
here.
to the rebuttal to the rebuttal.
35% here. I saw them as well, and I certainly understand it, and that's what, we recognize the need to make sure that we have a property tax rebate program for low-income families, disabled, and our older adults. And that's why I doubled down and with City Council in 2019 budget to make sure we help people through this transition, because we are in the midst of an amazing transformation that's growing, and we want to make sure people are able to stay in their homes, and property taxes shouldn't price them out.
But it's not doing enough, and property owners and businesses are drowning, and the city coffers are full, and all of our big projects are over budget. So we need to refocus on the people here
I
and
would
their
love for to name
sustainability
a
in the
project
city.
that's over budget. Name one.
The airport and the convention center.
You're wrong. I mean, the reality is we've tried to educate a couple times during debates. The airport response, the letter that she's referring to, or at least the report, is a one-sided report. It's a forecast from the developer. It has not been bought by the airport. Nothing is final. It's not a bill. It's not the actual project. It's what they say. This is what we think might be happening based on this concrete challenge. The convention center, we have not even contracted the convention center, so I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's a Denver Post report, so I take my facts
If
from
I
them.
may, Mayor Hancock, let's leave this question here. Do you expect that those projects will come in at budget?
Listen, we are going to, with regards to the airport, we are in the midst of an analysis to understand what the extent of the concrete challenges of this airport, a wonderful airport built in 1995. It is very premature. And if you understand what's going on, you understand that it's very premature to determine at this time the cost of the airport. Convention Center, because of the controversy, we had to pull back on that construction. Hasn't even been bid out yet to determine whether or not it's over contract or not. So these are premature conversations, whether it's coming from the media or from Jamie Gillis.
Okay, let's leave that there. We will get back to some of the city's major projects later. If anybody in the audience is lost, the airport faces potential delays on its Great Hall construction project due to some concrete problems. The convention center faces a delay due to a major scandal with some of the private companies working on it. Okay. Ms. Gillis, this next question is for you. You have talked about the idea of runaway development. Let's say that you were already mayor since 2015 or since 2011. What would you have done differently? How different would this city look specifically?
Thank you. There's a couple things around the development side of things. You know, I have talked about it in terms of scattershot density. So we have developers that are allowed to go through rezoning processes every Monday night at City Council, not tied to a big or comprehensive strategic plan, not being completely directed by the city. So you end up with density dropped in neighborhoods in ways that the neighborhoods often can't support, and is very frustrating for the neighborhoods.
Can you give me an example of that?
absolutely, you can look at you could look at Jefferson Park as a place that started as scattershot and then turned into a whole different neighborhood. You can look at density dropped into Wash Park, into the Platt Park neighborhood where I live along Old South Pearl Street, all being able to be redone through rezoning. You also have, through the form-based code that was passed in 2010, while Michael was on City Council, you have design issues. So we have seen design move and shift in Denver under the form-based code to maximizing the lot being built right out to the street, no room for tree canopy or open space. So that's a second piece that would have changed in that time. And the third piece is, I talked to an affordable housing developer today who's done a lot of work in Denver, and he called me and said, look, the truth is the city doesn't even get close to requiring enough of us out of affordability, out of open space. When I work in other cities, they demand much more of us as developers. So I think there's room to improve on how developers build things that benefit our neighborhoods.
Mayor Hancock, if you could respond specifically to the ideas of scattershot density, to the idea that developers are abusing the form-based code, and also if there's anything that you would have done differently.
Yeah, you know what? We look back on this amazing time of growth in Denver and the market, development community responding to the market. There are some things we would change. And I'll tell you, at the time, our planning director, Brad Buchanan, and I had a conversation and said, you know, if we obviously had known that the sustained development that was occurring in the city would be so sustained the way it was, architectural design would have been one of the things that we would have pushed a little harder in our neighborhoods, because you know we have these historic, wonderful neighborhoods, and neighborhoods want to see that the designs of these facilities, buildings, are aligned with really the architecture and the architectural integrity and history of their neighborhoods. And so that was one of the areas that he and I talked about, obviously. I'm going to tell you something. Some of the development, a great deal of development occurred. It was actually on books, or at least planning to be rolled out before I was even elected. But one of the things that I can tell you that they were taking advantage of was that rezoning that occurred in 2010. 2009, 2010, the whole swath rezoning. And that's why you saw some of these buildings built up straight to the curb. And this Comp Plan 2040 and Blueprint Denver allows for us to go back to where we create that buffer on the streets. And those are some of the things that, as I look back on it, absolutely we would rethink, particularly back in 2010, while I was on City Council, and how this would change neighborhoods and people's real feel of safety and the real sense of crunch, if you will, in neighborhoods. But that's what experience gives us, an opportunity to go back and rethink and to redo based on how we've grown in the marketplace.
Ms. Gillis, final thoughts, especially looking forward as to what you might do as mayor?
Yeah, there's a couple things. First of all, I think we do need to reopen our zoning code and fix it. I have worked on zoning issues. I worked on zoning issues particularly related to the design starting as early as 2014. And working with the planning department then, there was a recognition that things were not working with the form-based code, and yet there's been no move to fix it. So we need to reopen and address that. We also need to address the rezoning process. This ability for developers to come in Monday after Monday and ask for rezonings without a comprehensive picture on City Council's part by how it all knits together, I think is wrong, and we need a more strategic leadership from our actual planning department.
Mayor Hancock, Ms. Gillis said something there that you can respond to in the next question, that there's been no move to fix the zoning code. The next question is, does the city need to improve the way that it engages with residents, especially around planning and development? And if it does, how are you going to do that?
Well, one of the things we got to make sure we understand is that not all neighborhoods are equipped exactly the same. The reality is that Denver has one of the more engaging and robust communication processes through the registered neighborhood organizations across the city. But not all neighborhoods have people who have the discretionary time to be as involved, to monitor the development, to monitor the filing of permits, to monitor the development as well as some other neighborhoods. Some people are home, have people home all day who they have the leisure time to engage. Some neighborhoods are working neighborhoods, and they are bedroom communities that don't have the ability to engage. And so we've got to not just consider all neighborhoods with the same rubric across the city of Denver. And that has been one of the lessons that we have learned when I was a city councilman. And so I think I can speak to this with some credibility, is I moved into some neighborhoods that I represented and they didn't have RNOs. Every year, if something was going on in their community, it went to maybe a local newspaper person or the council person, but the resident didn't have any voice. I helped to establish those resident neighborhood organizations while I was a councilman. Took them through understanding the importance of having a representative body who receive this so you can respond and protect the needs and wants and desires. So the key is to be more strategic, be smarter about it from our Human Rights Community Partnership Office, and making sure that we understand the capacity of every neighborhood and that we help booster and elevate neighborhoods that maybe don't have the same ability to engage across the city.
Ms. Gillis, your own thoughts on improving neighborhood engagement?
Yeah, I agree. Every neighborhood is unique and it needs its own sets of tools. I have to push back on Michael, however, in terms of the work that the city has done. He may have been responsible for engaging with some RNOs, but on a big picture scale, the registered neighborhood organizations feel cut out from communication. And he started that conversation by saying the RNO system is fundamentally imbalanced because some neighborhoods have more resources than others to do that. My proposal has been to move city offices back into the neighborhoods so that city council people and representatives from the city are in the neighborhoods. I spoke with Federico Pena last night. This was something the city used to do. And when you look at other cities' best practices, they do that as well. They have city offices, the council people are there, they have liaisons with economic development, with planning, with public works. And those city folks are in the neighborhoods every single day. So they're not waiting for a crisis or an issue to emerge. They're working with the neighborhoods and they're engaging, reaching out into them. Not waiting for the RNOs to come forward, but ensuring that they have an ear to the ground on what's happening and they're communicating and they're that pipeline back to the city. And Montbello, again, when I was there earlier today, and Globeville, Elyria, Swansea, when I was meeting with folks last week, they both talked about the fact that that is the type of approach that they need because they are busy and they are working and they don't have the same levels of tools and resources. We can get there. We just signed a $4 million lease with the Denver Post building to move city offices in there. If we took that $4 million and spread it around the city for neighborhood offices, I think we could make a great impact in how we engage with community.
Mr. Hancock, rebut as you will.
Yeah, I will, because one of the things that Jamie speaks, first of all, the city did do that, and actually we had dispersed city council offices. I was in the district with my city council office, and I tell you, if I had one person walk in my office on a month, the reality, it just didn't happen. People didn't engage that way. They engaged with you through emails, they engaged with you through telephone. They did not walk into the physical office, and so I, as a districtman, closed that office and moved it back to City Hall, as many city council members have done. Our planning offices did the same thing. It disconnected people, the agency, from the various other partner agencies that they're supposed to work with.
Okay. Ms. Gillis, you've talked about disrupting an alleged pay-to-play culture in City Hall, including a network of lobbyists, developers, some of the biggest people in Denver. You show up week one of your mayoralship. What do you do? How do you disrupt something that you say is so entrenched?
Well, I think it starts with the quality of the leader in office and who it's most important to listen to. And I have said consistently from the beginning that this is a race about the people. This is a race about our communities and neighborhoods, about diverse representation from across the city, and about having people in there that challenge me, that think differently, that represent different voices that I'm used to having around me as the best way to get good leadership in the city. After the primary, I was honored to obtain the endorsement of support of Senator Penfield Tate and Dr. Lisa Calderon. And together, as we have worked to try to win this election, we've talked about what transition looks like with community engagement. We've talked about what transition looks like in building a team that has representation who actually understand the issues.
Any particular reforms on ethics and on influence, rather?
Well, I think we need to look comprehensively at our ethics reform. Now, we do have a fairly good reporting policy in terms of gifts and things like that, and the mayor will speak to that. But I think it's about who gets access to the office. And some of that is not so much an ethics reform as it is in the quality of the leader and the character of the leader and who that leader is most interested in listening to. And I'm most interested in listening to the voices of the people because the community is struggling and that's who I think needs to be heard first.
Mayor Hancock, your own thoughts?
You know, first I got to say that is just the most amazing statement for someone who has refused to go into some neighborhoods because she felt the conversations were going to be tough. Please
hold your applause.
I mean, that's just tough. That is tough because I I now know about 5 separate forums or debates she would not go to because of the difficulty. You cannot stand here and talk about representing and honoring and being representative, engaging, when you just refuse to have tough conversations. And then you can't do that as mayor. As mayor, you represent all the people. And as an elected official, you must be willing to go in. So here's the reality in this conversation, is that we, the article that came out talked about access to the mayor. But the reality is I have about, on average 600 to 850 community events a year on my schedule that I engage the community, cabinet and community every quarter. The article also concluded that nowhere did they find anything inappropriate, and that the city actually has firewalls that protect the city against undue influence or elected officials against undue influence. They talked about how I over-report on gifts and tchotchkes to my office. These are things that I believe are fundamentally important to honoring the ethics of the ethics code of the city and county of Denver. My bent from day one has always been, I was elected by the community, the people of this city. I've been in every neighborhood in the city, not when I'm running for office. I show up in town hall meetings, R&O meetings, to have conversation with the people of Denver, and I honor that. I know who I represent. And not one time did this article find any impropriety from me or my office when they did their research.
To provide a little context, the article was a Colorado Public Radio piece that mapped various lobbyists and the money and the time that they spent lobbying and around the mayor, correct?
It did. And they also did mention, the reality is that I've been in this city all my life. A lot of these people I've also known for most of my life in my career.
Ms. Gillis, he's given you a couple different things to respond to, including the allusion to debates in certain neighborhoods that I believe you were invited to. Can you tell us just a little bit more about why you weren't able to make those?
Sure, and I just want to start with a quick response to his last comment, which is that he's been here, he's connected to all these people. Michael's a career politician, I'm not. That's the big difference. I don't have connections to lobbying firms or friends that work for lobbyist firms. As to the debates, Michael, you missed a half a dozen debates in the primary, and those were in a number of different neighborhoods that were as important to those people. You know the reason I didn't come to the debates, that the couple that I missed, and it was not 5. That's because they were being hosted or facilitated by people on your payroll, and I wanted to have an authentic community conversation. And I had an authentic community conversation in Montbello today, in Globeville, Elyria, Swansea the other day, and we're continuing to go around the neighborhoods after I visited them all either once or twice in the neighborhood tour that we did in the primary race.
Mayor.
I have been serving as mayor full time while also campaigning. And if I miss an event, and I don't remember half a dozen, maybe 1 or 2, if I missed a forum, it's due to the fact that I have mayoral duties. You are campaigning full time. And for you to choose, and by the way, they're not on my payroll. You missed the Colorado Black Roundtable debate. John Bailey is on our campaign, but he had a separate independent moderator, and you knew that, and you chose not to come. This weekend in Montbello, those people were not on my payroll. Those folks, those are organizations, El Seminario, the Urban Spectrum, Montbello 2020, Montbello Organizing Committee, Far Northeast Neighbors. Those folks are not on my payroll. Those are R&Os out in the area who chose on their own volition to take us up on an offer to do debates all over the city. You chose not to go, and it's unfortunate.
But I was there today.
When people are at work, which is a working community.
We had a full room, and anybody who was there today can tell you that. Okay. We had 30 or 40 people there today.
Okay.
Ms. Gillis, just to follow up briefly, were you told that the gentleman who was working with the campaign would not be the moderator?
No, we were not told that at all.
And does your statement that certain people were on the payroll of the campaign extend beyond the Colorado Black Roundtable into? In
terms of moderator, we're talking about John Bailey, who stood up and did say that he was indeed on the campaign's payroll. In terms of the other debate, we were offered one time and one time only to do it when we had 2 other overlapping events, and we told them that, and they decided to move forward with the event anyway. So.
Mayor Hancock, next question is to you. You've talked about a Vision Zero approach, which of course means a vision of a city where there are not traffic fatalities. Last year, 59 people died on Denver's streets. The city has launched efforts toward this, a sidewalk expansion program, but so far some of those efforts have fallen short of the action plan goals. You've built 6 miles of sidewalk out of a project or an aimed for 14 in 2018. Can you talk about how much progress you have made and whether you're falling short on that?
So, Andrew, we got to respectfully disagree with you. We set some very ambitious, aspirational goals under Vision Zero. Vision Zero is one of those very aspirational goals that we're going to do everything we can to drive toward. We have 67 action points under our Vision Zero. We have completely redesigned 13 intersections. We have modified the operational aspect of 43 of them. We've installed 1,900 curb ramps in the city of Denver. But this has also got to be a bilateral relationship. The reality is that the city can't stop accidents when people are distracted behind the wheel. But yet we have people who will lobby the legislature not to put in hands-free laws in the state of Colorado. We got to work on people making sure they're wearing their seatbelts. 7 out of 10 accidents where we have fatalities, the 7 out of 10 people were not wearing seatbelts who passed away as a result of these fatalities. So we got a lot of work to do, but it's a very aspirational, ambitious goal to get to Vision Zero. And we're going to do everything we can. But the development and the coordination of our transportation and infrastructure department is all designed so that we can make sure we have a coordinated, very focused effort, not only toward our Vision Zero, but the implementation of our $2 billion commitment around transportation and infrastructure. And we're driving straight down the line on that so that we can make it safe for not only motorists, but bicyclists and pedestrians, for everybody who's on the road. But distracted driving is something that we really have to focus on, as well as folks wearing seatbelts.
Just to clarify 2 points. The city is moving, like Mr. Hancock mentioned, toward creating an independent transportation department, correct?
Yes.
And that $2 billion is outlined, but there's not necessarily a funding source on that identified.
We have boosted our allocation for transportation and infrastructure in the city of Denver, our general fund allocation by 30%. We're going to continue to drive that. But the people of Denver gave a down payment November 2017 at $441 million toward those goals. And we said, and I said then to the state and federal government, we have a placeholder for you. And we're working very hard to move those numbers on the state and federal level.
So more money to be found. Ms. Gillis, what will you do toward Vision Zero?
Well, I think, today there was a post by Streets Blog talking about asking the mayoral candidates whether they would commit to a number of about $6 million in additional funding just solely to address pedestrian safety. I do not know if that's the actual number, but if it's a $6 million ask to be able to decrease our pedestrian deaths, I think that's a reasonable number to fast track. We have passed GO bond money. We have invested, but there was some calculation made that at the rate we're spending, it would take us 100 years to finish all the improvements that we're going to do. Pedestrian safety is critical, and there are some quick and easy wins: crosswalks, pedestrian lights. And the other thing that we don't talk about in terms of pedestrian safety is the amount of construction on the streets and how that impacts people. So when construction projects are done, oftentimes roadways, sidewalks are blocked, bike lanes are blocked, and so pedestrians get pushed off, pushed around, and get pushed into traffic. I think that's another piece of this in terms of how we manage both city construction projects as well as private construction projects, that we can move the needle on these Vision Zero initiatives. Ultimately, sidewalks are important, yes, but I think that we should look for, as Streets Blog called for, some quick, easy wins to directly address the pedestrian safety now, and then work towards those permanent solutions as we go forward with GO bond funding.
Mr. Hancock?
Yeah, Andrew, those modifications that I talked about, the 43, as well as the redesigns, include longer crossing signals for the pedestrian, countdown signals, as well as reducing speeds. And we are looking very hard at how we reduce speeds through certain major corridors in the city of Denver. Reducing speed, as we know, does have higher efficacy rate in terms of reducing accidents as well as pedestrian fatalities in areas where you reduce speed. So that's a focus area that we have Public Works working on as part of Vision Zero. But again, I'll go back to the importance of reducing distracted driving in the city of Denver. I cannot tell you how that exponentially increases the accidents and fatalities on our streets.
Ms. Gillis, let's touch on homelessness and housing. During the campaign, you opposed Initiative 300, which would have created a broad set of rights to exist, to live outside, while at the same time saying that you found issue with the city's specific camping ban. So you opposed to the broad change, but pushed for or said that you supported a more precise change to the camping ban. The other day in a statement, you said that the mayor, as mayor, you cannot and will not overturn the ban. And part of your logic that you explained later was that the mayor doesn't make the laws in the city. But as mayor, will you push, will you lobby, will you use the power of that office to attempt to overturn the camping ban, as you previously said you supported?
Thank you for the question. So I want to address this head on by first of all saying, clearly by my opposition to 300, I do not support having people camping in our parks. I do not want to see people camping on our streets. I do not want to see homeless being pushed into the neighborhoods, being pushed down to the river. We need solutions and services. My conversation about the camping ban has always been that it was an overreach. It just caused a federal class action lawsuit in which there was an agreement set forth. But we can't just day one repeal the ban and think that that's the solution. Just as the mayor, we can't follow the mayor's lead in that the ban has been the solution to the problem when we see more camping than we've ever been before. I want to look at the policy and work with City Council to ensure we have the best policies in place to protect the health and well-being of people, to protect the health and well-being of our community. And I think the camping ban needs to be fixed. No policy in my mind that allows for continued lawsuits is good policy to have on the books. But as I said, I cannot repeal it. My focus is on delivering a comprehensive strategy and the resources for services and for housing as we look at the policy and tools that we need to address this problem long-term for the community.
We'll likely continue to have the presence of homelessness in public spaces. What is your thinking? Like, it's always going to be a symptom. Does the city need a specific tool or a law that allows it to clear people out of those public spaces?
Well, I think there's nuance to that. So the camping ban covers two pieces. It covers where you can't camp and have space, but it also talks about the criminalization of having stuff on you, having a blanket around you. And that's what makes this conversation so complicated and a little gray for people to understand. I don't think we want people being allowed to camp in our public spaces. That's not okay. But I also don't think that that tool has made sense to use in the terms of taking people's things. That's what got us the lawsuit, the blankets and the things like that, and using it to move people along. So there's a nuance to the policy. I think we do need to protect and prevent our public spaces for everybody in the community, which means not allowing sleeping there. But we also have to give people someplace to go and an opportunity. We do not have enough shelter beds right now for the people on the street.
Mayor Hancock, your response?
The urban camping ban was a valuable tool to not only make sure that we didn't have encampments occur in the city of Denver, but also to help the police and our navigators and our outreach workers provide direct services, bring direct services to those who are homeless. The number one tenet under the urban camping ban is to offer direct services. And then when that is refused, or if it's refused, then it's a progressive process to move folks to greater stability in terms of shelter. The reality is that we do monitor the number of shelter beds every night, and we also monitor the number of people we're coming in contact with. There are very few instances where we find there are not enough beds to move people to that we come in contact with. Typically, very severe inclement weather is one of those examples where we have emergency shelters and vouchers that we give people. So the reality is that when I became mayor in 2011, we were waking up every morning, 75 to 175 people on the 16th Street Mall or on our tree lines. And then where encampments occurred, they became very unhealthy, unsanitary, unsafe conditions. And so the urban camping ban became our tool to allow us to move in and to help realize and move people to greater stability and better opportunities. There's nothing compassionate about arguing for people sleeping outdoors. I will argue that every day for the rest of my life, that we can and must do better for people who are homeless in our city, but not saying I encourage you to sleep outdoors if there's not a bed for you. That's why we have emergency services in the city of Denver. And you did argue every day we were in the forum that you would repeal the urban camping ban. And that's why we released a video where we had clip after clip after clip where you stood and say, I will repeal the urban camping ban.
Ms. Gillis, your rebuttal?
Just so you had clips of me saying other things that were later fact-checked and proven to be false, because you take 2 seconds out of a 2-minute answer, and a complicated answer at that. I would argue on the camping ban that if you read the language of it, yes, it talks in there about services, but it's very complicated in terms of what actually happens. So there are 1,800 shelter beds. The point-in-time survey for Denver says there's at any given time 5,000 homeless people on our street, and we know that's likely more. The shelter systems do not allow families. They do not allow couples. Some of them don't allow LGBTQ. There are mats on the floor. If you work overnight shifts and during the day, you don't have any place to go. So we have a long ways to go with providing temporary shelter that truly can accommodate everybody, and that needs to be the focus of the conversation. If we're moving people, where are we moving them to?
This is something that Mayor Hancock will be able to address further in the next question. In 2015, a city auditor's report found that the city wasn't effectively tracking its progress on homelessness. In 2016 and 17, I did some reporting on the Crossroads shelter and the fact that it was exceeding by a significant amount its safely rated capacity, the capacity that was rated by the fire department. In 2019, the auditor's office found that Denver's Road Home was, quote, fragmented and understaffed. You've also launched efforts to start talking about 24-hour shelters.
Right.
But my question to you is, what has gone wrong with homelessness efforts over the years, and why are you moving more specifically on it now?
Well, one of the things, let me address a couple things. First of all, there are 3,500 homeless in the city of Denver. At any given time, you're seeing anywhere from 10 to 20% of them. So they're not now 5,000 or 3,500 on the streets. They are 3,500, and only about 600-700 of them we are seeing actually in our streets, on our streets in the city of Denver. There are 6 words. I will repeal the camping ban. Period. I don't have to clip that any other way. You said it, and it's clear, not once, but about 20 different times during the first phase of this election. With regards to the auditor's report, I take audits very seriously. I come from a nonprofit executive background. Audits are designed to make us better. When you look at how we administer all the myriad of services related to homelessness, you recognize that it's not just people who are unhoused. It's people who have mental health challenges, people who have medical conditions, and who are just been released from jail. And so you see a federated process around where all these dollars are distributed, and every agency is leaning in to play their role. Opiates and methamphetamines and drug and alcohol addiction driving a lot of our homeless numbers in addition to our growth. And so the auditor was correct. We are, I call it federated. We have it all the way across the city. The new Department of Housing and Homelessness is going to consolidate all that. Even before the auditor's report, we had spent 2 years designing the process to move in that direction, to consolidate so we can have more focus on it. I'm excited about it because I think it's going to be a much better operation with regards to not only addressing our homeless, but our overall housing spectrum when it's done and implemented.
Ms. Gillis, your own steps forward on homelessness.
Thank you. And I just want to reiterate, I have also said I, as mayor, cannot repeal the urban camping ban. That takes 13 votes, and I think we need to talk to City Council about whether or not they're willing to move on that unless they have a clear plan and strategy for how we're going to fix that. We do need better and more shelter facilities. We do not have adequate enough for all the reasons I just mentioned. So we need to focus on where are people going to go. The mayor keeps talking about the camping ban. Okay, fine, but we push people. And you know where those people to go? They come to your neighborhoods. They come to your alleys. They come to your neighborhood parks. If there's no place for people to go, then how are we looking at that as a solution? We need to provide immediate temporary housing solutions. And this is going to be a regional issue. A lot of our neighboring communities do not have shelter facilities either, and they're seeing increases in homelessness. So let's partner in the metro region to figure out where we move people. Second, we absolutely do need mental health facilities. We use our jails and we use Denver Health as mental health facilities right now. There is no long-term mental health facility in Denver. We passed a mental health sales tax in November, generating between $40 and $50 million a year that still has no plan, and nobody's announced how that funding is going to be spent. My concern is it will be fractured and divided all over a number of places. Let's build long-term mental health facilities for long-term care and address that. And third, we can improve that voucher program. I know the mayor made a last-minute announcement on this with the partnership and some businesses. That's great, but we need to expand it. We need to bridge the gap for people to get into housing while we ask our developers to build more affordable housing for this community.
Your rebuttal.
Listen, everything Jamie talks about, the city of Denver is actually moving forward with right now, not waiting until someone gets elected. Reality is that our strategies right now are about rapidly housing individuals. We have housed 1,500 people this year alone. We've housed almost 8,000 people since I've been mayor, and we're going to keep going in housing people. Through our social impact bond program, we now have 325 people in a nationally recognized model that has intensive mental health as well as drug and alcohol services attached to it. So we are moving in that direction. I'm kind of lost right now what we're doing. Is we at 30 seconds or what are we doing, Andrew? I'm trying
Sorry, that was the
trying to
second
understand what
comment.
we're doing.
Mr. Hancock has 60. No.
I'm a little
30 seconds.
So
I
we're all
apologize.
a little lost. I just want to make sure I'm respectful of what we're doing here.
Mr. Hancock, I believe that was your rebuttal period
Okay.
to Jamie's response. I apologize for
Oh,
the
that's right.
confusion.
I'm just a little confused. Okay, got it.
I'll be more clear.
Okay.
Ms. Gillis, you, as you know, tweeted in 2009 and asked the question of perhaps in a larger context, why cities feel it necessary to have a Chinatown. The next day, you said in an interview with Kyle Clark of 9 News that you had made a mistake. You didn't specify further. That weekend, you apologized for things that came across, that were said, that were done, that were insensitive. And a week after the original story came out, you sent a letter that more directly apologized in my eyes and laid out your fuller thoughts on Chinatown. Can you tell the audience a little bit about what happened in that week and about why it took that full week to get to the fuller response and a more direct apology?
Yeah, and I want to start by saying, I have acknowledged throughout this process that, first of all, I come from a place of white privilege. So part of this process of learning and understanding and hearing about things, the mayor accused me of using trigger words in some regard. I understand that there are stumbles to be made. And I fully respect that I have a lot to learn in this process, and that's why I'm in it, to listen and learn. On that particular thing, I responded, directly that, albeit clumsily and not very gracefully, there was a tweet that emerged that needed an explanation, that required an explanation. And I talked about it in the context of my planning experience and this conversation about how communities, ethnic communities, communities of color, have oftentimes been gentrified out of these parts of our cities, and yet we still have names on them and recognize them, but are we gaining value while they've been pushed out? I was approached by some members of the Asian American community and asked in a full letter to write a full response. And so that was what I did the next day, just kind of outlining where my thought was at. I have not heard back from the community, from those individuals specifically, but I've heard from many members of many different communities that they understand that this is a process of learning and understanding that we all have to get together. This shouldn't be a race about race. It should be a race about coming together and understanding each other. And
Mr. Hancock, your response.
Over this campaign, the most amazing thing to me has been, and concerning thing, is the pattern. It's I don't think not knowing the NAACP acronym is a disqualifier, but I think what offended people was the lack of willingness to educate yourself before that interview, because you had been asked that question before. And then you see Chinatown, then you see Taco Nacho lowriders. There's a pattern here that's disturbing. Even saying white privilege, that you acknowledge your white privilege, is disturbing to me. As someone who's been in the issues of diversity, inclusion, and fairness and equity, it's disturbing to me. And it presents a concern for me as someone who's been mayor, who has had to walk into neighborhoods, the very diverse neighborhoods and communities and households across the cities, whether they're mosques or synagogues, whether they are churches, parishes. I've had to walk into them, white houses, Latino houses, American Indian houses, and they should, at the very least, acknowledge and expect that you have the respect and honor for who they are, their stories, their past, their histories, and that you're willing to acknowledge that they are part of Denver. Not questioning, because you walk into an Asian house, where you really stood on Chinatown. And it's not so much about gentrification when it comes to Chinatown. These were tragic stories that created Chinatowns. These people were segregated, they were discriminated against, and they were terrorized, brutally beaten in many aspects. And so not to have that history today and be able to acknowledge that is disturbing. It's very concerning to me.
Ms. Gillis, your rebuttal.
Well, there's a couple things I want to say. First of all, when you talk about those triggers and knowing better, I just want to acknowledge the story in Westward that came out on Friday about the text that you sent to members of your staff that had the N-word in it and was very offensive. I also want to acknowledge the text that you sent to Leslie Branch Wise with sexual innuendo and the fact that we've had throughout the city a number of settlements related to that. That also is offensive and hurtful. That also is something in which you haven't directly acknowledged that it was sexual harassment, and I questioned you about that on the Channel 9 debate. So I just want to address that head on. We all stumble, we all make mistakes, but to sit there and say that, I think you need to acknowledge that you've made your own mistakes as well, and we learn through them every single day.
Just to clarify, Ms. Gillis is referring to text messages that you acknowledged sending in 2012 to a police, to a city employee.
Yep.
And before you get to her other point, I hoped that, and you have said that they were not harassment. Could you explain kind of what happened and why it was not harassment?
Yeah, let me
What
address
was
this
the-
first.
what was
I'd
the
be happy to
line?
do it. I'd be happy to do this. I'm going to use the word again, pattern. When you make a mistake, acknowledge it, learn from it, and don't let it happen again. When it was revealed 6 years earlier that I sent sexually suggestive texts to Detective Branch Wise, the first thing I did was not make excuses, apologized to Detective Branch Wise, to my wife and my family, to my community, to our city. And then I said, I'm going to learn from this. And it hasn't happened since. The reality is I said it wasn't sexual harassment. What you don't see, first of all, the text you're alluding to from the Westward, I don't ever remember that. And nobody in my life, no one in my life,
Hold it.
no one in my life will tell you, anyone who knows me knows I don't use that language. I don't use that word, and they know that. And so that came out of nowhere. I don't know where that came from, but I will not acknowledge it. But let me be very clear. This is about the text you keep bringing up. The reality is that there was never a lawsuit against me. There was never a sexual harassment claim against me, and there's never been a settlement that was directly related to my actions. And the other thing is when you see the text from Detective Branch White, you see my text.
Mayor, can you? Hold, please.
No, you don't see the reason why. The reason why I never said that it was sex. That's why. Reason why I say it was sexual harassment, because you don't see the back and forth conversation that occurred. That's the point I said. And so that's all I ever
Hold your
said.
applause, please. Sir,
That's all the questions. We can't just avoid all the questions.
we are coming up to the end of our debate. Conveniently. We now have time for closing statements, and I believe that Ms. Gillis is going to have the first closing statement.
And we have a minute and a half.
A minute and a half.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to you all. This has been an extraordinary mayor's race, and more than anything, I'm so happy that we have had the opportunity to have a conversation about the issues in the city. I said from the beginning, I got in this race because I wanted to put people first. I've spent my whole career working in neighborhoods, working in communities, trying to bridge the gap between those communities and municipal government to do better. And I heard cries out in the work that I've been doing in Denver about the struggles of the quality of life issues, from affordable housing to the overdevelopment, the runaway development ruining neighborhoods, to transportation, to our green space and our environment, to our schools, to how our families are living or not being able to live in this city. People want to see Denver thrive, but they want their quality of life to remain intact, and I do too. And that's why I got in this mayor's race, to make sure that we had an opportunity to have a conversation. I am not a politician. I am going to fumble and I am going to stumble. But I am willing to step up and learn as we go by surrounding myself with people of diverse backgrounds, with diverse perspectives, who will challenge me to do better for the city of Denver. So thank you again for the opportunity to the Denver Post. My name is Jamie Gillis. I'm asking for your vote on June 4th, and I would be honored to be your next mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Hancock?
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Denver Post and the Denver Press Club, by the way, who is one of our gold coin recipients in the city of Denver. It has been an absolute honor in my life to be the mayor of this great city. Ever since I was a little boy, I wanted to be involved in the leadership of this city, and I said I wanted to be mayor of this city. And that dream came true. But I'll tell you what, as we have grown and snatched the city out of the Great Recession, and I'm talking about we the people, have worked hard to really build a city that we can be proud of. Our growth has been something that indicated to us that we're a very desirable city, a desirable climate, vibrancy of our great neighborhoods, and a great business environment. One in which we can, I think, create the opportunity to address the challenges of a growing, thriving city versus having to respond to a dying city. You're not going to hear me talk negatively about Denver. We're going to acknowledge the challenges that this city has, but I'm not going to talk negatively about Denver or the people who I think have made sacrifices, have leaned in, made tough decisions, and have really made a difference in moving this city forward. They've shown up, they sat in community meetings, they voted, and they've helped make tough decisions on behalf of this city. They didn't make excuses. And yes, when they made mistakes, we have made mistakes. I've acknowledged them, and I've learned from them. I want to be the mayor that allows us to continue to address these challenges going forward. Not to talk about, I'm going to make mistakes, but to simply say, this is a great city, let's get better. I'm Michael Hancock. I'd be honored to be your mayor for the next term.
The Denver Post. Okay. The Denver Post says thank you to both Mr. Hancock and Ms. Gillis for joining us this evening, and for myself for speaking to me for many hours throughout this election campaign to share their visions for our city. And we especially thank the residents, the citizens who are watching in person and online. Please visit denverpost.com for our voter guide on the runoff races and the one issue on the Denver ballot June 4th. On the Denver ballot, which is the Olympics initiative. Election day is June 4th. Your ballots are due by 7 p.m. And keep up with us. Thank you all for attending, and may you have a good night.